Hi, Nathan and everybody. Thank you for coming back to our third talk. And today we're going to be just discussing public education in the broader horse industry. So Nathan, I might give it to you to sort of give us a bit of an understanding of what that means.
Certainly, and it could certainly go in many different directions, and this is definitely a topic that it'd be great, just in terms of input from others as well. But I think the EAL and EAMH sector of the horse industry is kind of adjacent, in that it kind of feels like here's like sort of the central horse industry. We're, in many ways, to me, the way I perceive it is we're kind of on the periphery in a way. And I feel like we have successfully managed to blend into the rest of, at least some other sectors of the horse industry and have an influence of, being able to sort of, I suppose, challenge the narrative of the horse-human relationship and how we interact with horses and how things can be done. And I think there's still sort of at least my perception is that the broader horse industry, there's still a lot of individuals who sort of superficially have a familiarity with our field in EAL and EAMH, and I'm sure they have a lot of appreciation for the work that we do, but I also kind of get this sense that it seems as though many of them don't recognize how it can be relevant to themselves. It's sort of like, okay, that's great that y'all are doing this really great work for those people, but they kind of feel like maybe they're an other. And go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's sort of that notion where people go, you're over there, but that doesn't include me, and I don't need that therapy or whatever that it might be. So they kind of put themselves to the side and say, I don't need that, or I don't need to learn that because I'm doing my own thing or my own discipline with my horse.
Yes.
So it actually can tie in really, really well for those of us who do the EAL, EAMH, but also have a discipline where we're doing dressage or jumping or whatever it might be that we're doing alongside it.
Most definitely, yes. It can be incredibly complementary to other sectors of the horse industry or disciplines that we enjoy recreationally or we compete in. And I think there's many aspects, or there's many facets within the horse industry to consider, but I think especially like that performance or the competitive world of horses. With my background in performance psychology and working with equestrians, I definitely notice that there is a bit of this discomfort around, I think for some individuals, knowing that my background is in counseling psychology and this EAMH, and it creates for some of this sense of curiosity, and then potentially for others, it sort of like fires the amygdala, and they're like fire alarm. There's still that stigma, I should say, around mental health, and that definitely seems to be something that fortunately since COVID, mental health care has become a much broader topic that more and more people are beginning to sort of dispel and sort of challenge that stigma. And I'm sure we're going to sort of see the ripple effects of that in the horse industry. And yeah, it'll just be interesting to kind of see, that influence of potentially more people in the horse industry maybe feeling a little less threatened by this idea of like, assisted learning or mental health with their horses.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
And I'm sure anyone in this group who has put themselves out there to do any sort of like public education in the broader horse industry, if you've done it more than once, you've definitely come to the conclusion that you can expect pushback, and pretty much feel guaranteed that others are not going to be quite as receptive. And I know for myself that can, that ties into that imposter syndrome, and it can really trigger that. And I've definitely learned through my own process that really being able to focus on those small wins, and knowing that by going out and doing a public talk, or potentially talking to boarders at a barn, after you've finished with like a client, and then they have questions, and really doing what you can to hear them out, kind of hear where maybe they have some skepticism, and do what you can to gently sort of dispel any sort of preconceived notion around what our work as practitioners really is, or the scope of our work, and being able to demonstrate that our work can be remarkably beneficial for high performers, clear up in the Olympic level of competing, to more your backyard sort of competitions, or not even competing, just your general trail riding and more recreational type of equestrians as well.
Yeah, and for me, it's sort of that idea. It brings up even Facebook groups and people posting and having those discussions, and just being able to sort of put in your 2 cents and feeling comfortable about that. But I think it can be really difficult. I'm thinking of a Facebook group that I used to be a part of, and just sort of the comments that were on there can be really harsh and mean to people. But then also seeing people posting things about horses that you see are not very nice, or the horse is in pain, and people think that it's funny, or they just, you know what I mean? And that seems to happen
Yes.
quite a lot. So I think being brave to sort of put your hand up, and obviously not being mean, but trying to sort of just create a little bit more awareness for people is really important as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I feel like sort of this notion in the horse industry, to survive, you kind of have to grow thick skin. And I understand why that notion is out there, but I think that type of culture only sort of creates more of this sort of toxic like environment, where we do feel concerned about whether we should engage, and what the repercussions of engaging might be for us, and whether especially through Facebook, or these like social media platforms, where it can be incredibly easy to misinterpret one's tone or inflections that really aren't there in this text.
Yeah.
And it definitely creates a rather vicious environment that I can definitely speak for myself, that I've been pretty cautious about how I put myself out there, and I think in some regard that works for me. It might not necessarily be everyone else's like prerogative and how they want to navigate it, but I do know for me that if I'm able to kind of structure my how I put myself out there to do any kind of public education, and sort of set myself up to kind of have at least a better sense of who my audience is going to be, so maybe I can speak kind of more directly to that particular subculture within the horse industry. I just know for me that level of maybe being able to control at least a little bit of who I'm speaking to, it sort of alleviates that fear of kind of being accosted by someone who clearly really cares about their horses, and clearly is just very passionate about what they want to share about their knowledge of their horses. And but obviously that message, the delivery of that message could have maybe been a little bit more thought out.
Yeah. And I think to further on that as well, and another really recent post came up for me that I found really, really interesting, and really, really got me thinking. And it was a well-known sort of agency in Australia who you can sort of nominate through to do competitions. But their main photo was a horse who was clearly in pain. So you could see the mouth was pulled back, you can see the eyes are pulled back. And obviously the ad agency who created that just had no idea. So someone's response and comment was, well, why don't we just email that agency really nicely, explain that this probably isn't a great photo to be promoting to children and to people who are wanting to compete, that this is what a horse should look like. So let's change that rather than blasting them on social media or whatever it is it might do, just letting those people know and letting those ad agencies know, or those who are sort of creating that media, that this is a happy horse, this is a not happy horse. Let's sort of portray the right image.
Yes, yes. Because, I think in all fairness to, like an agency, creating these publications, is that historically, in terms of how horses have been portrayed, sort of like John Wayne sort of culture and sort of this reining in the, reining in our horses in a way that, sort of this dominion mindset and beyond this, just that culture, but, certainly even in other, performance sectors of the equestrian world, where, like it's incredibly clear that, the horses are quite uncomfortable, and the movements that they're being asked to perform are really compromising their physiology, and it isn't practical or sustainable to really expect that of horses, and recognizing that it is something that they kind of did implicitly, unconsciously. Just they have this sort of the archetype of the horse that, for them it kind of looks that way, that this human really trying to kind of rein in and control the horse, and being able to see the open mouth and the eyes that are clearly high tone and distressed, and not recognizing that that's actually a sign of enormous distress in the horse, and that isn't something that, like you said, I think incredibly important. That isn't what we want to be illustrating for kids to see, and think that that's what they need to emulate in their relationship with horses.
Yeah,
exactly. And I think that really brings me, to my last point for today, in terms of public education in the broader horse industry, is to sort of glean on my experience within prevention science. Because in prevention science, it's really focused on large, wide-scale sort of systemic changes, by really targeting and focusing on younger populations. Because when we're addressing these really big public health concerns, it can be certainly beneficial to work with adults and be able to change patterns. But oftentimes, if we can get ahead of those public health issues by really being able to empower youth and teach them, forms of resiliency and coping skills that would prevent, these particular public health issues, we see a much broader and wider effect and long-term sustainable effect, by being able to work with youth who are much more malleable and impressionable in a good way, so that we can set them up for better success than we can trying to work with adults who kind of there's going to be 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. And by all means, that is incredibly worthwhile work to be doing with adults. And one of the controversies within prevention science is sort of that aspect of, well, we can't forget about the adults, and we certainly want to continue trying to work with adults, but being able to put that focus on youth is really important. And I think prevention science can really, in many ways, demonstrate that what we're doing in the EAL and EMH fields, we're actually doing a really great job, because I don't have the exact statistics in terms of like the average age of a client in EAL or EMH. But my perception is that it is largely youth, or at least adolescents. And, from that prevention science framework, I would certainly suggest that we are doing really great work. We are making very significant changes to the horse industry by being able to really work with so many young, people who very well may eventually become the future of the horse industry. And so, specifically like Pony Club or 4-H, those can be really valuable organizations to really target or to make sure that we are showing up and doing what we can to effect change for the long-term horse industry.
Yeah, absolutely. I think even having a representative or someone who can come out to a lot of those Pony Club days or the 4-H days, and just being able to create awareness, especially for the coaches that are there as well. So it's sort of a mix of both teaching the coaches and really, really focusing on the youth, so that everyone is leading by example and showing the kids how we should be interacting in the horse industry.
Definitely, yes. And, I feel incredibly fortunate. Later this year, I will be a keynote speaker at a regional 4-H conference. And, I just really fortunate to have a colleague who works within 4-H, and, 4-H is actually, doing a lot of great work within prevention science, because they do tend to cater to youth. And so, it's nice to, be able to have that opportunity to, speak to a lot of like middle school and high school students who are involved with, not just horses, but various other livestock animals, and being able to, bring the research that we're beginning to, really be able to rely on in terms of giving us a much clearer picture and, I guess, channel for being able to communicate with our animal companions in a much more compassionate and empathic way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this public education to the broader industry is such a huge topic. And there's so many different facets of education that we could do. But I think this is a really, really nice opportunity if we can get anyone listening to make a comment and just write below where you think change could be made in the broader horse industry, or what sort of change could be made. We'd really love to have a discussion below and just sort of get the ideas flowing, because we don't have all the answers, obviously. But I think the more and more people getting involved, there is more opportunity to make change. So
definitely. Well, and again, like, this has been such a pleasure to be able to have these conversations with you over the past few days, and just really look forward to the feedback that we receive from this group, and being able to take this conversation a little farther forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, everybody, for listening. It was fantastic to be a part of the first learning module. And yeah, I really look forward to, again, hearing everyone's feedback. And thank you so much, Nathan. It's been really, really lovely talking to you.
Well, likewise. Thank you, everyone. Take good care, and we'll look forward to hearing from you.
Great. Thank you. Bye.